Hello, and welcome to my presentation for class MDDE 690 with Dr. Susan Bainbridge. For today's presentation, I will be discussing the post-COVID-19 of emotional state of students today at school. To start, many countries have placed distance measures in order to stay safe from the coronavirus disease. The physical and social distance measures have caused numerous disruptions to daily routines. One of the many changes was transitioning in-person learning at school to remote learning in a short span of time period. Many children were unable to proceed to their daily routine of going to school for their learning, seeing their teachers and peers in person, and continuing their after-school programs and activities. This sudden loss of routine has created a confusion as well as emotional and mental health issues. For children and adolescents with mental health needs, such closures means a lack of access to the resources that they usually have through schools. Earlier this year, a study was conducted in the United Kingdom, which included 2,111 participants up to age 25 years with a mental illness history. 83% of the participants said the pandemic has made their conditions worse. 26% said they were unable to access mental health support. Peer support groups and face-to-face services have been canceled, and support by phone or online was challenging for most young people. Young Minds 2021. Physical and social distancing measures have caused many issues for young people that are already struggling with mental health. Resources that were previously used for coping were suddenly discontinued. For the resources that were transitioned to remote, many felt it did not have the same effect for most young people. School was a resource that many young individuals suffering from mental health use as a coping mechanism. Now that schools are closed, some lock themselves up inside their rooms for weeks, refusing to take showers, eat, or leave their beds. Chiu, 2020. With the loss of in-person interactions, students were having a difficult time being alone. The loss of daily routines and social activities created a big impact on children. In addition, children enrolled in special education were struggling to have their needs met, emotionally, mentally, and academically. Children with special education needs, such as those with autism spectrum disorder, are also at risk. They can become frustrated and short-tempered when their daily routines are disrupted. AU 2020. One of the sources that are implemented when creating an education plan for autistic children is aligning a daily routine with their learning. With the disruption of daily routine at school, many autistic children were struggling with loss of familiarity in their daily life. Due to this, many autistic children were short-tempered and more frustrated than usual. Young learners that were already struggling with mental health had felt that it got worse throughout social distance closures. The pandemic has had a devastating impact on many of the young people we heard from. Some told us that they were deeply anxious, have started self-harming again, and are having panic attacks or are losing motivation and hope for the future. Young Minds 2020. In Canada, if the cases of COVID-19 were rising, many provinces were ordering schools and public facilities to shut down without prevailing knowledge of the duration of each of these lockdowns. Teachers and school administrators were asked to create lesson plans for remote learning without considering that the majority of educators do not have the experience of online learning. For many schools, educators had to figure out what learning management system is best appropriate for their learners, as well as how to deliver lessons and assess students through distance learning. With no training from experts and only given a short period of time to transition to online, teachers were unsure if their lesson were as engaging online as it is in person. Among all students, 38% said having trouble focusing on studies. Active Minds 2020. Moreover, in-person schools have many learning support available for students. However, students were missing this aspect through distance learning. Number one concern students hope administrators are considering right now is academic support. Active Minds 2020. As more students are attending in person learning this year, there is a noticeable shift of change in their classroom behaviors. Schools across the country say they're seeing an uptick in disruptive behaviors. Belsha 2021. Educators are noticing students are unable to handle stress and are showcasing more emotion than prior the pandemic. A few students have forgotten classroom protocols, such as asking their teacher permission before leaving the classroom, expressing their emotion to their educators and peers, and a loss of socializing with friends during lunch and recess. Students trashing bathrooms, fighting over social media posts, or running out of the classroom. Others are quieter calls for help, like students putting their head down and refusing to talk. Belsha 2021. It has been a difficult start of the year for many educators. While there is a lack of support at most schools due to short staff, educators find themselves juggling a role of counseling for their students and teaching their curriculum. Coupled with staff exhaustion, the behavior challenges are making the school environments more tense than educators and students had anticipated, and underscoring how much support students need right now. Belsha 2021. One of the main factors that can suppress the mental health for many individuals during this pandemic is the lack of unknown. Through this pandemic, the disease of COVID-19 comprises lockdowns, certain facilities closing, schools shutting down and reopening, and then shutting down again. Considering how long the duration of this pandemic is, COVID-19 is speculated to cause long-term side effects. 67% believe that the pandemic will have a long-term negative effect on their mental health. This includes young people who have bereaved or undergone traumatic experiences during the pandemic, who were concerned about whether friendships would recover, or who were worried about the loss of education or their prospect of finding work. Young Minds 2020. It is evident that the pandemic has created many issues for students mentally and emotionally. The behavior issues are a reflection of the stress the pandemic placed on children. Belsha 2021. 3 in 10 parents say that their child's emotional and mental health is suffering now, while 33% can wait as long as necessary before their child's mental health suffers. Cauldron 2020. The question now is, what can schools do to help their students overcome emotional and mental health that they are struggling with that is also in the way of their successful learning? Given the scale of disruption that students have experienced over the course of the pandemic, parents and educators should know that some increased stress, anxiety, and apathy among students is expected. Students who were thriving in an active educational community before the pandemic may resist or find it difficult to fully participate in a virtual environment. As a middle school teacher, I've noticed students who were confident and enthusiastic when participating in the traditional classroom. However, now struggle to find their voice during a Google Meet class riddled with technological glitches and new cultural norms related to communication. Educators should expect challenges, but keep a careful lookout for sudden or extreme changes in student behavior, moods, and activities. If a student abruptly begins refusing to participate in their normal activities or begins lashing out in ways that can cause harm to themselves or others, it is important to connect with resources to help. As students are back in classrooms, educators should watch for new signs or social phobia or discomfort, understanding that students may struggle to transition seamlessly back into the social setting they successfully navigated in pre-COVID-19 times. With so much going on, it may be hard for adults to spot signs of distress in a timely manner. Harnessing increasingly sophisticated technological risk assessment tools, creating small group settings for students, and maintaining connection touchpoints are all ways to help ensure that someone spots and acts on a warning sign in time. Universal screening to identify students in need is an established method to identify students who may have difficulties with anxiety or depression through systematic screening of the school population. For elementary school students, screening involves teachers and students completing brief questionnaires regarding students' emotion and classroom behaviors. At the middle school and high school levels, Screening primarily relies on student questionnaires regarding the frequency or severity of any emotional concerns. Teachers may also be asked to nominate students who appear to be excessively anxious or frequently sad. School mental health professionals, such as counselors or school psychologists, use scores on these questionnaires to identify students who appear at risk for anxiety or depression difficulties. Sometimes these at risk students are asked to complete the questionnaires again a few weeks later to determine whether their mental health challenges are enduring. Prior to COVID 19, approximately 15 to 20% of students could be expected to be identified as needing support through screening. Dowdy et al. 2015. This percentage will almost be certainly higher given to the potential emotional fallout of this pandemic. By building social and emotional learning into the daily routines of your classroom, you'll provide students with a reliable way to deal with whatever feelings they're experiencing. Even small exercises can go a long way towards helping kids feel safe and validated. One example I came across previously and started exercising with my students is a feelings temperature, where students are asked to label their emotions using a feelings word chart. Then they rate the intensity of the emotion on a scale from 1 to 10 and notice where in their body they're experiencing the feeling. Is their heart beating faster? Do they feel tension somewhere in their body? Do they have a stomach ache? Students then track those feeling check ins in a journal and, if they feel comfortable, share with classmates. You can also normalize and validate feelings by taking bits of time throughout the day for direct social emotional learning education. For example, you can read out loud about feelings or mindfulness or facilitate journaling, role playing, media discussions, or even just a quick group check in about feelings. This idea is to let students know it's okay to feel exactly what they're feeling in the moment and give them tools for days when they might be experiencing uncomfortable feelings. Other tools students can practice is a mindfulness corner where students take time to reflect and understand their feelings and or self-calming strategies taped to their desk. Incorporating mindfulness practices means learning to pay attention to the moment on purpose and without judgment. There are many creative ways to incorporate mindfulness into your classrooms, and some of the following are interesting exercises that I've come across. 2-minute meditation, trying to start the day with 2 minutes where you encourage your students to focus only on their deep and slow breathing. Awareness, noticing detail. Students can practice mindfulness during activities like coloring, dancing, listening to music, or even eating. This helps them notice small details about their surroundings and what they're doing. What is it that they're hearing, smelling, seeing, feeling, or tasting? Relaxation skill of the week. This teaches students relaxation strategies for when they are calm and gives them tools to use when their feelings do get intense. Help them build toolkits by introducing a new relaxation skill every week and practicing it daily as a class. More simple skills to focus on include paced belly breathing, progressive muscle relaxation, and guided imagery. It is important to remember that the model that you and your students create so you can take the time to verbalize moments when you are beginning to feel stressed or overwhelmed and narrate as you use one of the relaxation strategies to calm yourself as an educator. Children can usually tell when adults are hiding something from them, which can make an already anxiety provoking situation feel even worse to them. Since they often assume that things are worse than they actually are, that's why it's important to help your students understand what's happening without overwhelming them with information. When students do come to you with questions and concerns, it's important to validate their feelings and then provide answers to their questions as much as you can. For younger kids, visual and stories can help provide information in a way that they'll understand. For example, you might create a document with pictures highlighting rules in your classroom around masks, hand washing, and social distancing measures so that students have a clear sense of what's expected. With so much unknown already happening, it's important to help kids feel safe and less stressed by listening and answering to their questions. During the COVID-19 school closures, school staff and educators are going above and beyond reasonable expectations to develop relationships with students, many of whom they had never met in person, and the positive impact of those efforts are showing. Reminding students that they have these strong relationships to rely on as they return to school can help them feel supported and known. Teachers and school staff can focus on addressing the needs of children by modeling empathy, encouraging students to share their feelings, and instituting social emotional practices. CASEL 2021, such as classroom circles and morning conversations to create routine that promote security and comfort. Schools can consider ways to help students feel connected to the broader school community, like broadcasting audio and/or videos to communicate school announcements and support virtual clubs. Schools should capitalize their focus on existing structure like homerooms as well as considering to create small classroom groups of students that are mentored with the help of a teacher and also providing an additional socialization opportunity with students in their group. It is also important for institutions to connect with social workers and psychologists within their community. With mental illnesses such as anxiety and depression rising, it is important to network with professionals that can be a resource for students at risk, especially with the ongoing changes currently taking place. As students are emerging from a year of unknown in which many aspects of their lives felt completely out of their control, schools should consider taking a proactive approach in promoting efficacy among their students as they guide them in returning to school. Supporting students in developing self management skills as well as coping strategies can help promote the sense that they can manage struggles, work through them, and bounce back. Teachers are encouraged to work with mental health staff in creating supported opportunities to discuss the toll of the pandemic in their community. They can acknowledge the complex feelings that accompany reopenings and provide students with instruction on emotional management strategies, such as deep breathing, progressive muscle relaxation, mindfulness, and positive self talk. Schools can consider instituting school wide mindful moments or other initiatives that encourage self care. To promote empowerment, educators and school administrators can take time to acknowledge the unique expertise and perspective that students now have as they have navigated school during a pandemic. Staff and educators should consider asking them of their experience and infuse their voice in decisions whenever possible. We can all agree that the COVID-19 pandemic and ensuing school closures have been unique and that no student in the country remained untouched in some ways. As discussed earlier, many schools are dealing with students returning to school with social, emotional needs and behavioral issues. Students who have been without services, school-based or otherwise, will need support as they navigate the process of rebuilding a new normal. Educators and school administrators are encouraged to appreciate that the academic and behavioral challenges in which they might be coming across and to understand that these challenges might have their roots in trauma and should not be handled in a punitive manner. School counselors and psychologists and social workers can provide intervention approaches to strengthen self regulation, help seeking, and coping skills for all students. After the initial phase of returning to school, it is encouraged to collaborate with families and communities to seek assistance in helping students cope with social emotional struggles.